Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.
It's The In Show, Australia's only show dedicated to innovation from Adelaide, Australia and across the globe.
Hi, this is David Grice and Troy Simcock. This show has been so inspiring and we're rapt that you're listening once again. We're talking about innovators and entrepreneurs, startups and people with great ideas making them a reality, and they're not just happening where we are, they're happening where you're listening too.
Absolutely, in 37 countries, Troy.
It just goes to show that innovation really is universal, and people are so up for changing the world and looking at problems facing us all, no matter where we live, and making a better life for people.
Absolutely, and if you're an innovator that's in any of those 37 countries, including Australia and the US and many, many more, please feel free to drop us a line because we'd love to hear your stories.
We certainly would. Now, Claire always bats up news from all around the world, and it is amazing the corners of the globe that innovation is happening. It literally is occurring everywhere, and we've heard some pretty weird and wonderful things over time. But isn't it funny how at the time we think it's that way, and then years later you're like, oh, of course. But, you know, it takes that one person that has that vision that can somehow see into the future that ends up, you know, impacting our lives today.
It's not only just the vision, it's the people that actually can not only create the vision, but make it happen as well.
Yeah, exactly. They're vitally important. Well, let's find out what Claire's got for us in news this week, including a story about artificial intelligence and how that's recreating images located in the brain. What have you got for us, Claire?
Thanks, guys. Lots happening in the world of health. Scientists have developed a blood test that can detect 8 sorts of common cancers. The team of researchers from the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, teamed with Australian scientists from the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute to create CancerSeek. It's a new blood test that can detect super tiny volumes of proteins and DNA produced by cancerous cells that travel through the bloodstream. CancerSeek can detect liver, breast, ovarian, stomach, bowel, pancreatic, lung and esophageal cancers. This test is a non-invasive liquid biopsy that can be used instead of a traditional biopsy. It can be performed whether the patient has been diagnosed or not, meaning cancer can be detected in its early stages. Important because diagnosing cancer early can reduce the number of cancer deaths. So far, the CancerSeek process has been tested on over 1,000 people and has a success rate of approximately 70%. Clinical trials are being held across the US, but it will still be a few years until the test becomes widely available. More from the health industry, and biohackers are developing artificial pancreases that could potentially make life easier for diabetics, and this year they could become commercially available. Diabetes is caused by a failing or impaired pancreas. It's a condition that stops the body from making or withholding insulin, which is what regulates glucose levels in the blood. A diabetic manages their disease by regularly monitoring their blood glucose levels, daily food intake and exercise to determine whether they need insulin. Otherwise called hybrid closed-loop systems, these artificial pancreases can measure blood glucose levels every 5 minutes and provide insulin when it's needed. It was developed by members of the open source community and larger groups, including the Open Artificial Pancreas System project. To use the machine, you need a continuous glucose monitoring appliance, an insulin pump and a computer that can communicate with both. As it hasn't been approved by the US Food and Drug Administration yet, you have to build it yourself by following step-by-step instructions. Of course, it's a work in progress, so the technology will continue to be improved. Scientists in Japan say they've used machine learning artificial intelligence to recreate images located in the brain. Researchers at Kyoto University used functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, to record the brain signals, and a type of AI called the deep neural network, which was able to reconstruct the pictures using the data. During each session, the 3 participants involved, who were aged in their 20s and 30s, were shown images of a lion, a post box, letters and shapes. The pictures were displayed inside an fMRI scanner on a screen, and the subjects had to bite down on a bar. In the second part of the study, they were also asked to remember the pictures. The study lasted 10 months, and the results are quite astounding. The recreated images are slightly blurry, but they do resemble the original versions. This shows that subjective and perceptual images in the brain can be accessed by AI technology. Imagine if this could be used by law enforcement to get inside the minds of suspects. And that's what's in news this week.
Thanks, Claire. Well, David, that gives a whole nother meaning to photographic memory. In fact, we can all have one. You know, once upon a time, you'd hear about these geniuses that could recall things almost exactly as they were. Now we can all have access to this.
Yeah, and look, I think the interesting thing about this is going to be, if you and I were seeing the same thing and we then went into this machine and, your version of what we saw and my version of what we saw might not be quite the same. So I guess that's just going to be a very, very interesting take on learning about other people as well.
Yeah, from what I understand, eyewitnesses have not been trusted for quite some time in terms of law enforcement because they know that, people are coming from their own context. So whatever you see within that context is whatever it is. It's not actually what's real. It's your version of what's real.
Yeah, look, I could just imagine the applications and implications of something like this. It's going to be fascinating to see where this one goes.
It kind of means that humans can be more relied upon, but just using artificial intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's David Grice and Troy Sincock. We're talking innovation on the In Show podcast, and you can check us out at the inshow.online Facebook and follow the In Show on Twitter as well. Tomorrow, our interview is with a woman who's probably the most connected person we've ever spoken to, David.
Oh, absolutely. Somebody who began as a farmer and is now calling herself a digital farmer.
We'll find out what that means on tomorrow's In Show podcast.
The In Show News. Subscribe to the In Show podcast on iTunes. A Dave and the Beanstalk production.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.